The Plain of Judgment. Both of us were walking rapidly again. As soon as we left the limits of the throne, we encountered an extremely hot and humid atmosphere. It felt as if the distance between the sun and the earth had reduced from 90 million miles to a mere mile. There was no breeze. Everyone was drenched in sweat. There was no sign of water anywhere. I was under the influence of the drink from Kausar. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for me to spend even a second in this atmosphere. However, I could see countless extremely weary people loitering around in the same suffocating atmosphere. Their faces displayed horror. Their eyes were full of fear, and their hair was covered in dust. Their bodies were soaked in sweat. Dirt was all over them. Their feet had blisters with pus oozing out of them. I had never seen such a horrible scene of despair and fear in my life before. There was chaos and disarray wherever one looked. Everyone seemed to be concerned only with his or her own self. I was searching for familiar faces. The first face I recognized was that of my teacher, Farhan Ahmed. He saw me from a distance and immediately turned away, trying to avoid eye contact. I said to Saleh, "Stop him, Saleh! He is my teacher! I want to talk to him!" He stopped me from moving towards him instead and spoke in a remorseful voice. "Abdullah, do not add to the humiliation of your teacher. If someone appears to you suffering here today, it means that justice has been done to him and he has been found lacking in deeds, as per the scales of divine justice. That is why he is in such a state." I spoke in anguish. "But Saleh, I learnt all about the belief in God, focusing on the hereafter and ethical values from him." "You may have," Saleh replied carelessly and continued. "However, his knowledge failed to become a part of his personality. God does not pass a judgment based on a person's knowledge. The fundamental factors that determine the decision are one's deeds, character, and personality. The role of knowledge is really to help lay the foundations of one's personality on sound footing. If the personality has not developed on the right foundations, the knowledge in fact becomes harmful for the person. As a Persian poet once said, "When knowledge is only skin deep, it is like a poisonous snake. Only when it sinks deep in the heart does it become a true friend." The same thing happened to your teacher, Abdullah. He was a good writer. He spoke well too. However, his character and personality were not in accordance with what he preached. Therefore, in a way, he was also nurturing snakes. These snakes of knowledge have bit him hard today. When you see people here, you will not find them as per their appearance and words in the previous life. Instead, they will be a true image of what they really were in the life bygone. Remember, God does not judge people based on their words and external appearance. He only looks at their deeds and personality. Particularly, people with knowledge would face a much tougher standard of accountability today. Many lapses that would be acceptable from ordinary people on account of their lack of knowledge would not be accepted coming from scholars. "But he sacrificed a lot," I said in his defense. "True, but he got his compensation for that while he was still alive," Saleh replied. He continued further, "Errors in knowledge may be overlooked today. However, failings of personality and deeds will result in the same state as your teacher is in. Anyway, the day has only begun. Let us see what else happens before it ends." I stood in a state of shock for a long time. I was an orphan with no one to look after me. My teacher meant everything to me. He was my mentor. He helped me in my education, arranged my marriage, and gave me a purpose in life. He was dearer to me than a real father would have been. Hence, I was shocked to find him in that state. Because of that, I became quite oblivious to my surroundings. Around me, countless people were walking, running, and struggling along. Loud echoes of the roaring flames were mixed together with the shouts, cries, and wails of people. People were busy taunting each other, hurling abuses at each other, and blaming each other. Many were engaged in full-blown scuffles and fights. Around me, a few persons held their heads in their hands, while others threw dirt on their faces. I could see people hiding their faces in shame. Others were being disgraced. Some were banging their heads on stones. Others were beating their chests in anguish. Some were blaming themselves, while others were having a go at their mothers, fathers, wives, children, friends, or leaders, holding them responsible for their ruin. All of them had the same problem. The day of judgment had arrived, and they had not prepared for it. Now they could blame others or themselves. They could mourn or be patient, but it was not possible to change anything. All that was left to do was to wait. Wait for the arrival of the Master of the universe, following which the accountability was to begin, and the destiny of every person was to be determined with absolute justice. I kept standing aloof from all that was happening around me, for God knows how long. Suddenly a person nearby cried out, "Ah, I was better off dead. Even the pit of the grave was better than this." His lament made me aware of my surroundings again. In an instant, all memories from the start to the end were refreshed in my mind again. I turned back and looked at Saleh. He was staring at me with a blank expression on his face. He said, "Abdullah, you chose to come to the plane of judgment, leaving your allocated station behind, in order to observe what was happening here. It is inevitable that you would come across more scenes like that. As such, you need to be mentally prepared. To save you from further shocks, I have to inform you that right now, one of your daughters, Layla, and your son, Jamshed, are also present on this plane of judgment. Both are in trouble." Saleh's words shook me to the core. I started to feel dizzy and sat down on the ground, holding my head in my hands. Saleh also sat down quietly next to me. Tears were running down my cheeks. However, no one around me took any notice. No one cared about what was happening to others. Why was a person sitting on the ground? Why was someone standing? Why was someone lying down? Why was somebody crying? Who was yelling and wailing? Nobody cared. Today, every person was concerned about his or her own self only. No one had the time or the inclination to stop by and inquire after me. People passed by us indifferently. After a while, I asked Saleh, "What is going to happen now?" Obviously, the accountability will start. Only then would we know something for sure. He replied definitively and then explained further. Those people who had made this day their foremost priority in the previous world and led their lives preparing for it have woken up today in the fortunate position of having been declared successful beforehand. They include those who fulfilled the requirements of true faith and morality, as well as those who strived hard in the way of their Lord. They had reaped only goodness in their lives. They fulfilled the rights of their fellow human beings and met obligations of their Creator. Therefore, for them, death itself was a harbinger of relief from trials of the previous world. They have received divine protection since the start of this day of judgment. But all human beings committed sins in their lives, did they not? I asked. True, they all sinned. However, their good deeds made up for their minor sins. The tears of repentance they shed immediately after committing any significant sins washed those sins away. Today, all those people are under the shadow of the throne. They will only face brief ceremonial accountability before their eternal success is declared. In contrast, those people who committed major sins that practically invalidate one's faith, like rejection of the truth, assigning partners to God, hypocrisy, murder, fornication, rape, apostasy, dishonesty in trusts belonging to orphans, repeatedly ignoring the limits set by God, and all other sins of similar nature, will be sentenced to hell. Saleh explained the law in detail. But there are always human beings who fall in between the two extremes. What will happen to them? I asked. Saleh replied, "You are right. There are people who have faith in their hearts, as well as some good deeds to their credit. However, they committed many sins and did not repent. Such people will have to bear the harshness of the day of judgment as a payback for their misdeeds. Only then they may have a chance of forgiveness. All those people stuck on the plane of judgment today are those who are either major criminals destined for hell, or those who had faith but also committed many sins. So the tribulations they undergo today are directly related to the number of sins they committed, as well as the gravity of their sins. The ones with fewer sins will be relieved right at the start of the accountability. However, as I mentioned before, the time that has elapsed so far is equal to hundreds of years of your previous life. Even if these people are pardoned at the very beginning of the questioning, the centuries spent on the plane of judgment are enough to eliminate any lingering after effects of the misdeeds committed in those 50 years of life, whereas people with a lot of sins to answer for may have to bear the hardships, sufferings and toils of this extremely harsh environment for thousands or hundreds of thousands of years to come. Saleh's explanation made me realize that sins that seemed so trivial in the previous world have caused so much misery today. Alice, if only people had not considered their sins as trivial, if only they had developed a regular habit to repent, if only they had realized the seriousness of ills like backbiting, spitefulness, wasting money, pomp and show, slander, etc., if they had appreciated the significance of the rights of God and other people, if they had stayed away from disobedience to God and had instead followed the way of the holy prophets, they would have managed to avoid this present situation where the short-lived gratification of each sin had turned into an agony spanning centuries. I asked Saleh, "Does anyone know at this time if he or she will be pardoned or not? And if so, how?" Saleh replied, "This is the real predicament. No one knows what future holds for him, or if there is any hope for salvation. Only God knows. This is the reason the last prophet of God, as well as other prophets and messengers, were praying for the commencement of accountability. If this happens, at least the ones with true faith in their hearts would be separated from those destined to hell, and therefore get salvation after going through the process of accountability. As you know, no one is able to say even a single word to help someone else, nor is there any possibility of it. The good news is that the last prophet's prayer has been accepted. If you recall, his representative Abu Bakr, the truthful, conveyed that news to you in person. But why can I see no sign of start of accountability?" I asked Saleh with surprise. He replied, "The Almighty has accepted his request, but as far as its execution is concerned, He will do so as per His own larger plan and wisdom. It is possible that all the people who rose from their graves may not have reached here yet." I replied, "What do you mean? Have they not managed to get here despite a lapse of so many centuries?" He replied, How do you think they will get here? Do you think they will use aeroplanes, trains, buses, and cars to commute? Today, everyone is rushing here on foot. The sound of Archangel Raphael's trumpet has forced people to head in this direction. The Almighty has filled the oceans with earth and flattened the mountains to allow people to get here easily. Even then, it will take them some time, as they are coming on foot. The only exception is the righteous people, who were accompanied by angels who brought them here straight away. Anyway, let's see what is happening to the people gathered here until the accountability begins. If I remember correctly, this was the reason you came here, right? Saleh held my hand and started to walk ahead without waiting for my response. People's faces were glowing red due to intense heat. Dirt and rubbish was flying all around. Worried people were roaming around, alone and in groups. My eyes were searching for a familiar face, but could find none. Suddenly, a girl appeared out of nowhere, and before I could have a look at her face, she fell down at my feet and started to sob uncontrollably. I looked towards Saleh with great concern. He said to the girl in a flat voice, "Get up." Saleh's tone caused a chill to run up my spine. The girl also pulled herself up, looking quite scared. I now looked at her face. It had darkened due to fear, apprehension, and grief. There was dirt over her hair and face. Her lips were parched due to thirst, and her horror-stricken eyes had shadows of fear and terror in them. Suddenly, an unbearable wave of anguish passed through me. The first time I saw that face, I had involuntarily praised its beauty. It had a glowing fair complexion, an eye-catching profile, attractive features, rose-petal lips, a blue hue to the eyes, and jet-black hair. God had bestowed her with such natural beauty that it did not require any makeup or adornments. However, today that face looked completely different. Beauty of the years gone by was now buried deep under layers of grief and sorrows of the Judgment Day. The person standing in front of me as a picture of utter lament, horror, and remorse was in fact Huma, my daughter-in-law and the wife of my eldest son, Jamshed. "Please save me, Papa. I am in a lot of distress. This environment will kill me. I did not face any hardship in my life, but now it seems to me that I will not see any relief ever again. For God's sake, have mercy on me. You are very close to God. Please save me." Huma started to weep bitterly. "Where is Jamshed?" I asked in a sunken voice. "He is around. He has also been looking for you. This is such a large place with so many people that it is impossible to find anyone. He is also in a bad state. He was very angry with me. As soon as he met me, he slapped me and held me responsible for his doom. I am a bad person, Papa. I destroyed myself as well as my family. Please forgive me and save me. I am petrified of God's retribution. I cannot bear it." Huma was pleading with tears running down her cheeks. Fatherly emotions started to rise in my chest. After all, she was my daughter-in-law. Before I could say anything, Saleh spoke again, with the same emotionless tone. "You should have thought of that in a previous world, madam. You have come to your senses now. However, do you remember what were you like in the world? Maybe you don't remember, so let me remind you." Saleh signaled, and suddenly a scene appeared in front of us. It was Jamshed and Huma's bedroom. I felt as if everything around me had disappeared. and I was standing in the room along with them, able to see and hear everything. Jamshed, I cannot live in this country anymore. We should move to a western country, said Huma as she sat at the dressing table, brushing her short-cut hair. Jamshed was lying on the bed watching TV. He did not reply. Did you hear what I said, Jamshed? Yes, I heard you. My whole family lives here. How can I leave them behind? Just like you left them and moved in with me. That was different. At least I go and see them once a week now. Secondly, we go on foreign trips every year anyway. So what's the point in moving abroad? No, kids are growing up fast. I would like to raise them abroad. But I want my kids to enjoy the benefit of my parents' company. I didn't get any share of their nobility. At least, I would want my children to be like them. But I want the kids to stay away from your parents, Jamshed. Even if one of them is influenced by them, his life will be ruined. The phone rang. Jamshed picked it up. Some words were said at the other end. Jamshed put the phone down after saying okay and said to Huma, "Your dad is calling us down." He then replied, "Why are you so negative about my parents? They accepted you as their daughter-in-law just for the sake of my happiness, despite the fact that they did not approve of your ways. Even when you forced us to move out of our ancestral home, they did not feel bad about it." "Hold on, that's not the case," Huma snapped. "Your parents may not have liked my ways, but you were madly in love with me, which forced them to give their blessings to our marriage. You have enjoyed a much better life over here since you left them. You are a business partner of my dad. You deal in millions. Your decision to marry me has proved to be a win-win deal for you, Jamshed. You have not suffered any ill effects because of your decision to leave them. Whenever I hear you talk like this, it reminds me of what my father used to say. He always said that the true verdict about profit and loss shall be passed on the day of judgment. Come on, Jamshed, stop this useless religious talk. Such ideas irritate me. There is no such thing as Judgment Day. This world's system has been running like this for millions of years. If you are smart, powerful, wealthy, you are the winner. All others are losers and idiots. Moreover, you know this Judgment Day talk is nothing but rubbish. By the way, for your kind information, my dad has this assurance from his peer that he will have him spared on the day of judgment. My dad gives a lot of money to him. Yes, obviously, the way we earn money by illegal profiteering, violation of the law and other means prohibited in our religion, we have to make it clean somehow. I know all about it. Your dad and Chaudhry Mukhtar are business partners in various ventures. They make money through dishonest means. Really? If you're so concerned about ill-gotten wealth and dishonesty, why don't you quit? I can leave the business, but I can't leave you. I am well aware that if I am employed elsewhere, I would not be able to afford your expenditures or maintain your current standard of living. Alas, my love for you has left me stranded in the middle of nowhere. In fact, I belong to a family where all that matters is whether money is earned by religiously lawful means or not. That's why they are living such a miserable middle-class life. You are lucky that you moved out to live with me at my parents' home. Otherwise, just like your brothers, you would have owned only a motorbike or a mere 800cc car and would have died after living a pathetic life in a flat somewhere. We all have to die one day, whether we live a lavish life or one of deprivation. Who knows what will happen to us in the hereafter? Don't worry, nothing will happen to us. We will enjoy a life of luxury over there too. Even your God will not be able to do anything against the wishes of my dad's peer. Don't utter these blasphemous words, Huma. Moreover, why would he be my God anymore? If I haven't remained loyal to him, Why would he remain on my side? As Jamshed uttered these words, his voice choked and his eyes became wet. However, Huma did not see the tears running down his face, as all of her attention was focused on the mirror. She got up after she had finished her makeup and said to Jamshed, "Okay, let's stop this pointless discussion. Let's go downstairs. Dad is waiting for us." Saleh signaled again and the scene came to a stop. As it disappeared, any faint hope Huma might have had disappeared with it. Saleh spoke again in the same brutal and deadly tone. "Did you see that? Every single word that came out of your mouth has been recorded. So go, madam. Go and find your dad's peer who had the power to have you spared, the one in front of whom even God could not." Saleh left the sentence incomplete, but the anger that exuded from his voice while he repeated Huma's words shook me with its intensity. Huma turned pale with fear. Before Saleh could say anything else, she ran away, screaming. After seeing Jamshed in that scene, my condition had again become unstable. Obviously, like Huma, he would have also been wandering in this plane, suffering all the hardships. I wondered what I would do if Jamshed appeared in front of me in this state. I was still thinking about it when Saleh patted me on the back and said, "Come on, Abdullah, let's go." I do not know what was in his touch, but as soon as he touched me, the level of anxiety that had overtaken me was suddenly reduced. I started to walk with him, quite relaxed and fresh. Around us, it was the same commotion of worried and horrified people. We had gone ahead only a little more when I saw Mr. Chaudhry Mukhtar. He had probably seen me and was heading in my direction. Mr. Mukhtar was the business partner of Jamshed's father-in-law. He was my acquaintance only in that capacity. As he came closer, he tried to embrace me, but Saleh stopped him with a movement of his hand and said, "Keep your distance and speak." Saleh's tone was so harsh that he seemed like a stranger to me. Despite this insult, Mr. Mukhtar's enthusiasm did not fade. He said, "I was certain, Mr. Abdullah, that you would come looking for me. Do you remember that I had a mosque constructed and you used to pray in that mosque? In addition, I also used to help the poor." "I remember, Mr. Mukhtar," I replied in a low voice. "Then please put in a word for me. I have been roaming around in misery for a long time. Whoever you see over here is only concerned with himself. No one talks properly, nor gives any advice." As he said this, he involuntarily looked at Saleh. I also turned my head to look at him. Saleh looked at me for an instant, and then started to talk while staring at Mr. Mukhtar's face. "You certainly had a mosque built, but it was not for the sake of God. Rather, you wanted a good name for yourself. When one donates money for the sake of God, one's head is bowed, hands are fastened, and the voice and the heart are full of humility and fear of God. However, you were not like that when you made donations. You wanted to be recognized by others as a pious person. Therefore, you had your wish granted during your life. Now you will have to explain how you earned all that money. Moreover, it was not often that you spent money on a good cause. Would you like to tell us how you spent millions in order to get close to a famous movie star? You are guilty of fornication. You indulged in it not once, but repeatedly. You fornicated with many different women. You had illicit relations with famous actresses and fashion models. Even if we leave aside how you spent your money, the way you earned the money included various prohibited and forbidden means. You were involved in adulteration. You hoarded stuff illegally. You sold goods at exorbitant rates. The fundamental principles of your business were to underpay utility charges, commit fraud, and deprive employees of their rights. At the peak of your career, you formed a media group. On one of the TV channels belonging to your group, you used to show religious programs to keep the public happy, whereas on another one, you used to promote immoral attitudes and vulgarity in the society. all in the name of art and entertainment. Saleh was speaking non-stop and words were flowing out of his mouth like arrows heading straight for their target. It was not possible for Mr. Mukhtar to respond to these, but he had nowhere to run. He kept listening, with his head bowed in shame. The harshness in Saleh's voice produced expressions of hopelessness on Mr. Mukhtar's face. However, Saleh did not stop and continued further. "Look back, Mr. Mukhtar. Your mistress is standing behind you." Mr. Mukhtar turned around quickly. I also looked around to see who was standing behind him. In front of us was standing an old woman who had a face like a witch and an extremely strong stench emanating from her body. Saleh touched me again, which caused the smell to disappear, but I could see that Mr. Mukhtar could still smell her. The ugly woman moved forward towards Mr. Mukhtar, calling him by his first name. Mr. Mukhtar slowly started to retreat, backing away from the woman, and then without any warning, he started to run away from us. That woman or witch, whatever she was, also started to run after him. "Who was that woman?" I asked Saleh after they had disappeared from sight. "She used to be his mistress. She was famous in her times as an actress, dancer and model. Her name is Champa." As Saleh introduced her, I was shocked. I said, "Champa? But she used to be very pretty. She was well known for her beauty." Yes, not only did people talk about her, she was also a role model for them. See how that ideal personality looks like now. That woman used to promote vulgarity in the society with her explosive and revealing dances. God has decided that she will be imposed as a punishment in hell on those very people on whose hearts she used to rule, said Saleh laughingly. I remembered that lewdness and immorality had spread to its highest level during my time. Television allowed these actresses to reach the living rooms of all homes. Societies of that time had elevated such women who spread vulgarity and nudity to the highest levels of respect and importance. For the owners of TV channels and film studios, these women were the cheapest and the easiest way of making huge profits. They filled their coffers with money by promoting their filthy dances, enticing moves, and revealing garments. Young men were madly in love with them and wanted to marry women who looked and acted like them. Women used to style their clothes and makeup after them. It was because of them that girls of good moral character but ordinary looks lost their true value in the society. So many of these virtuous women grew old, all alone, unable to find suitable husbands. Many left this world in silence, hiding the scars of society's lack of appreciation within their bosoms, deep under the cover of their nobility. My face showed signs of anguish. Saleh recognized them straight away. He held my hand and started to walk in a direction. We stopped after a little while and he said to me, "God has made some arrangements to alleviate your suffering. However, before I show you that, it may be better if you see this scene from the world bygone." Rays of morning sun were entering the room in spite of the curtains on the windows. It was time to go to college, but on this cold winter morning, Shasta did not feel well enough to leave her warm bed and get ready. It was her habit to do some study after the morning prayers and before she got ready for college. Today she had gone back to bed after offering the prayers. She had not felt well since last night. "No, I have to go to college. Otherwise, my students will lag behind in their studies, and I need to make breakfast for Mom and Dad as well," she thought. She then gathered all her strength, got up from the bed, and quietly walked over to her parents' room, situated next to hers. She opened the door slowly and looked inside. They were in a deep slumber. She smiled with satisfaction. Shasta had devoted her whole life to her family. She was only a child when her father was disabled. She was the eldest amongst 3 sisters. Somehow, her mother managed to get all of them educated, earning a paltry income sewing clothes. After completing her education, She started to teach in a school and later joined the faculty at a private college. It was a time for dreaming and making big plans. Shasta was not too pretty, but youth is beauty in itself. For Shasta, however, youth was a harbinger of new responsibilities, leaving no room for dreams and desires. She was now responsible for the household expenditures, her father's medical treatment, house rent, and education of her 2 younger siblings. Both of her sisters were better looking, so as they reached the right age, most marriage proposals were in their favor. Shasta did not create any hurdles in the way of her sisters' happiness. She readily arranged their weddings and got them settled in their new homes. Her youth began to fade away in the process, and now she found herself alone, with the sole responsibility of looking after her aging parents. During these difficult times, Shasta kept her faith only in God. She loved God immensely. This love was so intense that none of the hardships in her life managed to breed any resentment in her. Shasta was regular in prayers and fasting since childhood, but she became familiar with the true sweetness of God's love only after reading books of her spiritual teacher, Abdullah. It was now the sole aim of her life to transfer the true essence of God's love and submission into the young hearts of her pupils. Shasta was an excellent teacher and her students respected her immensely. It was for this reason that they listened to her attentively and conversely. She always taught them with utmost enthusiasm. For some reason, however, Shasta felt sad today. It might have been because of not feeling too well, but she felt depressed. After breakfast, she stood in front of the mirror to get ready for college. She looked hard at her face. She could see signs of youth fading away. A painful smile appeared on her face as she mumbled to herself, "Shasta, you lost. You did not get anything but loneliness." She closed her eyes, perhaps as a sign of acceptance of her defeat. However, at that very moment, she heard the words of her teacher Abdullah echoing in her ears. The one who makes a deal with God never suffers a loss. She opened her eyes with a smile. She said to herself in a sustained voice, "Let's see. We will see what happens. Not much time is left anyway." The scene disappeared. I looked at Saleh and said, "I don't know this girl." Saleh replied, "You will get to know her soon. By the way, whatever you wrote went a long way." He started walking. After some time, we reached a place where some stern-faced angels stood. They looked similar to the angels we had seen under the throne, whose job was to stop ordinary people from moving ahead. On seeing Saleh, they allowed us to pass through. After a short distance, we came across a door. Saleh opened the door and entered it, with me following behind. I realized straight away that the door was a gateway back to the other world, as on the other side there was a completely different environment in contrast to the exhausting atmosphere in the plane of judgment. I said spontaneously, "Saleh, are we going back to the tents of the prophets?" He replied smilingly, "Yes, the remedy for your grief can only be found over here." We walked ahead and reached a magnificent tent. There was a man with a glowing face standing at the door. He had an air of high respectability about him. He was a complete stranger to me. On reaching closer, Saleh introduced me to him. "This is Abdullah. He is a follower of the last prophet of God, Muhammad, peace be upon him, from the later part of that age. Abdullah, this is Nuhur, a very close companion of Prophet Jeremiah, peace be upon him. Nuhur, you wanted to meet him, didn't you?" It was not only an introduction to a companion of a great prophet, but it also explained to me why I was there. I extended my hand for a handshake. However, Nuhur instead hugged me enthusiastically. I said to him after the embrace, "I have not had the honor of meeting Prophet Jeremiah yet, but to meet you is no less of an honor. The life of Prophet Jeremiah and the circumstances surrounding him were always a great source of guidance for me. I am very keen to meet him." As I said these words, the life story of this great prophet of the Israelites was running in my mind. In the 6th century BC, the Israelites were in a state of severe moral decline. Due to their moral decay, they were suffering the divine punishment of a political domination by Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, which was a superpower of that time. Their leaders, however, did not address their moral weaknesses and focused instead on regaining political supremacy. Prophet Jeremiah highlighted the flaws in their morals and faith and encouraged them to work on the correction of their flaws instead of confronting a superpower. However, his people did not listen to him. Instead, they hanged him upside down in a well and thereafter started an uprising against Nebuchadnezzar. As a result, Nebuchadnezzar descended on them like divine punishment and devastated Jerusalem. He killed 600,000 Jews and took an equal number along with him as slaves. As I was thinking about this, Nuhur replied, "You will also meet him soon, God willing, but at the moment I want to introduce you to someone else." As he said this, he turned towards the tent and said to someone, "Will you come out for a second, please? See who has come to meet you." As soon as he said that, a girl came out from the tent and stood beside Nuhur. Her attire resembled that of a princess, and she looked like a fairy. She bowed her head and greeted me respectfully. She then said to me, "I am Shasta. You do not know me, but you are a teacher to me, and due to this association, I am your spiritual child. I was once surrounded by dark shadows trying to lead me astray, but I found the light of God's true religion through your writings. You are the one who first introduced me to God. I discovered the true nature of a human being's relationship with God because of your work. Look at me now. God has bestowed a great honor on me. I am to be married to a companion of a great prophet." Saleh had shown me the scenes from Shasta's life only a few moments ago, but the radical change in her form astonished me. The happiness I felt due to my encounter with her was difficult to put in words. I said to Shasta, "I heartily congratulate both of you. I hope you will invite me to your wedding." "Yes, definitely. That's why I called you, so I could show Nuhur that his in-laws are not ordinary people," she replied smilingly. "In that case, you selected the wrong person," I replied quickly. I then turned towards Nuhur and said to him, "However, Shasta's statement is absolutely correct. Your in-laws are not ordinary people, and how could they be? Shasta belongs to the nation of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. This relationship to the last prophet makes her family very important." Saleh interjected at this moment and said, "Let's leave the decision about status and position for later. Now I have to take Abdullah back, so please excuse me." We left after saying goodbye to Nuhur and Shasta. Saleh said to me on the way back, "Did this take care of your sorrow?" I had just witnessed the immense blessings of God on His servants, which had left me speechless. I therefore kept quiet. Saleh continued, "This girl managed to attain such a high position because of her patience. God tested Shasta through tough circumstances and a plain appearance. In spite of all the hardships, she remained steadfast and grateful to God. She remained devoted to Him. You have seen today that those people who were not recompensed in the previous world have become entitled of a very high reward on account of their steadfastness." I stopped walking, I looked up at the sky, saw the Master of the Sky in a new light, and then bowed my head in gratitude and appreciation.